All right, Micah, the red light went on. Let's start off with what's your 90-minute pitch?
90-minute pitch?
Yeah, 90 minutes. How about 90 seconds? We'll go 90 seconds.
Yeah.
All right, you caught me. You got it.
Yeah.
You're like 90 minutes. Okay, let's get into that. All right, let's hear your 90-second pitch to investors in today's world.
90-second pitch
Yeah.
is the film is about a husband and wife who he studies cloning and she studies memory. She dies in a tragic accident
Mm.
and he uses their combined technology to bring her back. But when the memory integration fails, he's left raising her clone from childhood.
Oh,
So this is a feature film made here in Colorado, and we are positioning to make a $500,000 movie that looks like $10 million.
that's all right. All right, that's exciting. So let's dive into that a little bit more here. So, how does that work? Kind of what are the steps to this? Where are you guys right now in the process? How do we start this mission?
Yeah, well, where we're at right now currently is we're in the fundraising process.
Mm-hmm.
So figuring out every single different check mark along the way that needs to be done in order to get that money. So that comes everywhere from having a really thought out schedule and knowing what our shoot plan is going to be, all the way down to what the business plan and the ROI returns are going to be and what distribution looks like.
Mm.
Our goal is to have as many of the I's dotted and T's crossed as possible in order to make sure that we're organized. A lot of filmmakers are artists first and foremost, and they're not as savvy on the business side of things. And as the industry changes, we're realizing the need for it to be a multidisciplinary art.
Mm.
So we have to be able to be savvy business people as well as marketers, as well as storytellers and artists.
Yeah.
And so it's mainly just making sure that we've thought thoroughly about what are possible blind spots that we might have,
Mm.
or what are other people doing that they thought they were doing right, and what's wisdom we can get from people who've done this before. And then also, how do we take our own experience making shorts and other types of commercial projects and roping in some of the most talented people that we know in order to make something great.
What's a couple things that you guys think of right now that's just different than maybe traditional Hollywood productions? Like maybe two or three things that you just know, like that's what they're doing, but we're doing something a little bit different that we think is going to have a little bit better return down the road.
Yeah, the first one is just budget, right?
Mm.
So like Hollywood is a bloated industry
Mm.
that's pretty much since the origin of this medium. I mean, it's only about 130-year-old medium, right?
Mm-hmm.
And from the very beginning of filmmaking, it started making money. People wanted to see it. It was a magic trick. And so because of that, money has been flowing into this industry in excessive amounts for all this amount of time, and that causes unnecessary spending.
Mm.
So some of that transition is allowing it to become more of an art form and more of a blue collar industry, to where it's saying, instead of, well, I know your day rate is $1,200 a day, who's someone who's really passionate about what they're doing and is willing to do it for half that?
Mm.
And because they care about the thing that we're doing. The thing that I'm constantly reminding people who work on the movie is we love movies. Like, we're doing this because we love movies.
Yeah.
If we wanted a smart job, we would go have a smart job. This is one of those that you get called to do it, and that's the first and foremost thing that makes it different, right? And it
Yeah.
allows us to have a much smaller budget without compromising any of the quality. Another one is kind of what I talked about just there briefly, is multidisciplinary,
Mm.
making sure that you as a director are also a producer, are also a writer, are also just thorough about what you know you need on a given day,
Mm-hmm.
and building the relationships, making sure that you're getting sponsorship. That's another big one, is who are you partnering with?
Mm.
A lot of times people just throw money at a problem, and Robert Rodriguez used to always say it, which is you can solve problems two ways. You can be creative or you can throw money at it.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're in a creative industry, so it makes sense to be creative about every single step of the process.
Yeah.
And then other smaller ones is just like some of the technique in the form, which is sound design. Sound
Mm.
design is fairly affordable to do, and is just a lot more time on the back end,
Mm.
but that's what makes a movie feel big
Yeah.
and makes a movie feel professional. And so just making sure you're diligent about the sound and the music and what's happening there. And then just knowing what's going to be in the frame, because
Right.
that's all that matters, is those four lines.
Mm-hmm.
What shows up in those, that's what makes a movie feel um, professional. And
Yeah.
so as long as it's planned out thoroughly and you know how to shoot, there's a new kind of attitude in people these days of shooting very much more guerrilla.
Mm-hmm.
The technology allows us to be able to shoot really high quality guerrilla filmmaking
Yeah.
that doesn't require 16 hours on some crazy setup for a shot that we might not even use.
Right. So how do you guys, at this point, where you are in the production of everything, secure actors and talent? So how do you go out to find the people that are passionate, like you're discussing, and want to kind of jump into this project and go kind of join your team? How do you guys sort of find people like that right now?
Yep. So I started off because I knew I wanted a couple names attached to this movie. But I also cast based off of meritocracy. So I just want the very best talent. And I've met a few actors here in Colorado, two in particular, who are pretty unbelievable. And so I know that there's really undiscovered talent in a lot of places. And so it's about combining who are the names, the ones that people would recognize and have some experience under their belt, versus the ones who show this incredible potential to sort of rise up and become a star. And so I started out just reaching out to some of the most well-known casting directors out there and just being like, hey, can I hop on a call? Can you maybe give me some advice, figure out how this works? And in doing that process, I ended up getting an actual submission application for a casting director from the ex-executive of casting at Hulu.
Hmm.
And she and I hit it off, and she was able to do it for a very reasonable rate, and I pulled her on as my casting director.
Hmm.
And so then she helps work and negotiate relationships with the agents and gives us a short list of different actors that we can prospect. And then as far as actors wanting to do a role, honestly, if you can get it in front of them, actors want to act,
Yeah.
and they want a juicy role, and they want a thorough character. And this movie is kind of prime for that. There's a lot of roles in here that you can really sink your teeth into as a performer.
Yeah.
And so then we rely on that, right? Which is,
Mm-hmm.
we're not going to be able to throw you $500,000 for this role, but what we can do is make it a really fun time for you to feel comfortable and get to see a part of Colorado you would never have otherwise seen, as well as sink your teeth into something with some creatives who are talented and hardworking.
Yeah. How did Colorado come into play in this? So we used to have. I'm in Michigan. I'm outside of Detroit. We had the film and tax incentives for about 5 or 6 years, and we had all these movies being made here. Is there anything similar to that happening in that state, or is it just that's where you guys are?
Nope. Yeah. So our incentive program here is actually not great.
Okay.
I think it's like 20 to 22% max.
Mm-hmm.
But the real problem is the budget for it is so small that money gets used up very, very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
So it's still something that we'll end up applying for just to see what extra we can get towards our
Sure.
budget. But for me, I don't really like the idea of relying on that. I think movies should be a profitable industry. I think you should be able to raise your money without having kind of a handout in a lot of different ways. And as much as we'll take whatever money we can get. The main reason for Colorado was a few different things. One is I was born and raised here. And then I graduated from school and I watched all my friends move to these different states because there was an industry there. And I've always been a director. And I know that the difference between a director and, say, like a gaffer, for example, is the gigs that you find versus the gigs that you make.
Right.
And so I think Colorado is a beautiful state and I have great connections here. And I think that 20% that I would get in a tax credit, I could save in just some of the relationships that I have.
Sure.
And then also it's becoming a prime state for some aspects of the industry that are kind of coming here. So we have Sundance 2027. That entire film festival is moving to Boulder, as well as there's some Amazon headquarters for some of the prime stuff that has just moved into on one of the same studios as a good friend of mine.
Oh, interesting.
And so there is a hungering for more film production here. The state incentives are just the one thing that hasn't caught up yet.
Yeah, right. I've worked on a number of films myself using crowdfunding, and one of the things that I struggled with, and I'm interested to hear your answer, is actually explaining how you make money in this business, right? So if I were to get my mom on here, or even my wife who works at my company, she'd be like, I don't know, we just go on Hulu or at Netflix and I watch the movie. I don't know. I pay our $19 a month. I don't know. How do you guys make money? Like what does this look like? How do you describe it to somebody that's just a novice and just wants to open their TV and watch something?
Yep. Well, I mean, it happens in stages, right? So like the cool thing about a film is once it's done, that product is a product forever.
Mm-hmm.
And so the first stage is the most obvious one, which is, well, in theaters near you, right? And so you build relationships with distributors to where you can say, all right, how are we independently releasing from 20 theaters at a time to 50 theaters to we have a plan that can reach us all the way up to 2,500 theaters. And so then that happens in its own little run. And that's as simple as, yep, you spend an average of $16 per movie ticket in order to pay for that. A percentage of that goes to the theater, a percentage of that goes to the financiers, and then a percentage of that goes to us. And then the second stage goes into the VODs. There's like SVOD, TVOD, AVOD, which is sort of, there's while the movie's in theaters, you can still purchase the movie on your TV, but it costs more, for example. And then it goes to actual rentals, to where you spend $5 and you can watch it on Vudu or Hulu or Amazon or wherever you want, to where you spend money to rent it. And then, of course, AVOD, which is what's most independent filmmakers are hoping to get some little buck from, but that's kind of our last tier for this film, mainly because I don't want ads to run in the middle of my movie. But that's how a lot of filmmakers are making money these days. And then once you're through with that tier, then you move over to subscription services. And then you essentially negotiate a deal with a different streaming platform, like, let's say, Hulu, for example, to where they say, okay, well, we want to buy it or we want to license it. And then usually what will happen is they'll give you a certain amount up front that goes towards the overall profits. And then usually there's a percentage split based off of what it's doing after that. So it's a few different stages like that. And then, of course, there's the things outside of that. So those are all things that we have built in for just North America. Then you take into account, do that same exact process overseas in Europe. Depending on the type of movie that you have, it can be way more accessible to a European market than an American market. And then there's always supplementary things outside of that, which is like swag. Like A24 does a really good job of their hit movies. How are they doing these professional lookbooks? And Midsummer has a bunch of these fun different like hoodies and kind of collections, or a special release DVD, things like that, that the true fans will still spend money on.
Right. How do you think about your target audience right now with this film? Like do you guys go into thinking about that audience first, or is it a afterthought after the content's created, the movie's made, and then you start to think about it, or is it a combination? So how do you think about your target audience and what distribution is going to look like for it?
Yeah, so for making art, I don't think you should almost ever be thinking about the audience inherently. It needs to first and foremost be something that you would want to see, and then trust that there's other people out there like you. But then once you have a script and you're going to production and you are thinking about kind of what our demographic is, then I think about it in a few different ways. One of which is knowing how to market to, because every filmmaker wants to say this, my movie is for everybody. No,
everyone,
it's not.
which equals nobody.
Right. But that said, from the ages of essentially 25 to 45, that's exactly where our movie sits in its prime use, right? And then from that, it comes down to how are you targeting people more specifically to get them to watch it? Because a good film does grab almost everyone, right? To where if the scenes are effective and the story is good and it ends with catharsis, most people are going to like your movie if you've done everything right. Of course, there's always people who get turned off by the fact that there's language or it's R-rated, things like that, but that's an aside, right?
Yeah.
The question more comes down to is how are you targeting specific people to go in to your movie theater specifically? So we have this data through this company called iScreening Room, which allows us to take demographics from scene to scene throughout an entire scene and get specific demographics of what age, what gender, what interest level liked this particular scene versus this one. They might not like this scene, but they might really like this scene. And then when we go into our advertising, then we can say, well, we're going to target this entire demographic with this particular scene or content like this in order to pull them into the movie theater or get the rental. And then for this demographic over here, we're going to target them with those particular pieces of content, right?
Interesting.
And we've already entered into an age to where scenes are becoming more effective at advertising than trailers are. Netflix is a good example to where you hover over a title, it starts playing one of the more engaging scenes. It hooks you well enough to where you're like, ooh, I want to go and watch that. Instagram will do the same thing. So for us, it's understanding what scenes are working for who, send and advertise to those particular demographics, and we'll just let the data tell us, right? We'll gather. Can't be like, well, it's going to be men from the ages of 25 to 35. That's who's going to like my movie.
Right.
No, it's we figure out what the data is, who are those people resonating with, and then let's make sure the people who want to see it get to see it.
Yeah. And what stage are you guys at right now, as of October 1st, when we're recording this? Where are you guys in production, distribution, all these sort of things? Where are you guys right now?
We're in early financing. So production actually happens in April to May of next year. So April 20th to May 22nd are our shoot dates. We are in financing. We're about a tenth of the way through financing the film. And then at the same time, we're doing some early pre-production stuff to just make things are primed and ready for things in the coming year.
Gotcha.
So anything that isn't focused on raising money is how do we organize the film, which ends up contributing to how we were raising money. Same with distribution, right? It's like we already have a game plan, but that also helps us with financing. Filmmaking is a collage art form, so it's not linear.
Hmm.
You kind of have to put together all these different pieces at the same time in
Right.
order to slowly compose the
Hmm.
entire image.
And how, like, did you create anything to get into fundraising, like a trailer or early things? Like what do you typically want to create to get some attention that I want to send people to right now, right? Like what kind of exists right now, and how do you go into that thinking, all right, I gotta create a little bit of something,
Yes, absolutely.
maybe the appetizer. What's a couple appetizers that's on your menu right now for
Yep.
this?
So the three big things that have been the biggest assets that I would encourage any filmmaker to do is one, just make sure the script is strong and
Mhm.
that it's proven and tested. Second is spend a lot of time on a pitch deck that you're really proud of. And then third, go and shoot something.
Mhm.
Prove that you can do what you say you're going to do. So that's what we did. We took a scene directly out of the script. We said, how do we stick to our budget ethics and say roughly $1,000 per minute of screen time? Let's make something that looks like a feature film. Let's get a name or some sort of clout attached to a given thing, and let's go and shoot it for a small budget.
Yeah.
And so that's what we did. We went and shot a scene. We got a 6-time Emmy winning actor and producer in the scene, as well as we were on time and under budget for that particular scene. And if people are curious, they can see that on the WeFunder campaign.
Gotcha. We mentioned WeFunder, and we haven't gotten to it yet, but let's pivot to that right now. How did that come into just the game plan itself, right? Of fundraising. How'd you guys get there? Why'd you guys get there? What was some of the thought patterns behind it?
Yeah, it was honestly a YouTube video that I saw. I saw a kid who was talking about how he raised $1.3 million on a campaign site that was I was curious about. And
Mm-hmm.
then I looked into it more, and I've always had this attitude of I've always been a little bit distasteful of filmmakers who are just begging for cash to make their glory project. Instead, it should be more of a how can we get equity in someone's glory
Yeah.
project? Like, how do they, if they make something that's successful and I've given $20,000 to support the arts, I think it'd be really cool to make $40,000.
Right.
And then that made sense for me because I just understand crowdfunding a decent amount. Like I've been doing a bunch of that in the past, and I've had a lot of friends who've done that for their films. But to me, Kickstarter and Indiegogo kind of feel like they had their time in the sun.
Yeah. A long time ago.
And WeFunder was new
Mm-hmm.
and it was exciting, and I was seeing a lot of success there. And I was seeing that not a lot of people were taking advantage of it yet.
Mm-hmm.
And it allowed for a lot of opportunities to manage and hold all the investment in a way that was a lot more approachable and accessible rather than taking private investment from places.
Right.
And then allows that everyone can have a piece of the pie if they want
Yeah.
to.
Yeah.
For those people who don't know, WeFunder is crowd equity, which is like crowdfunding, except you essentially get a little piece of the ownership of that property.
Mm-hmm.
So where you can make money if we make money.
Yep. Yeah, it is I always think it's a great thing for projects like this, movies, art type projects, because you do get more buy-in typically than than a Kickstarter. Kickstarter, yeah, maybe you get the DVD. I don't know, you see it in the theater. Yeah, it's great, it's nice. But ultimately, man, if you can get a little bit more buy-in from people, it does help in the long run. So, how do you guys sort of think about the festival scene? What sort of happens after all this is shot? Maybe what we're looking at, 18 months from now, maybe. I don't even know, after everything's kind of put together, maybe a little bit less, but what do you guys start to look at in terms of getting momentum going for it, getting it out there? Probably a little bit of that before distribution. Maybe I'm assuming you're gonna have a little bit of time there for maybe the festival world, possibly. Like, what does that look like? What does that time frame look like?
Yeah, so that's our A plan, right?
Mm-hmm.
But as far as festival goes, unless you're in kind of one of the big five, then it doesn't really seem to do much other than get you some laurels and maybe have a good introduction. So because Sundance is coming here to Boulder, they're going to want a Colorado film, and we're kind of primed and set for that. We've started making some of the relationships that we need for that. In addition, it's a great festival because they are just merit-based. They want the best films. And so to me, it's motivating to just make the best film that I can make with a singular and unique vision and give them something that they want to screen at their festival. But that said, like the amount of research I was doing of, well, people are like, well, if you get into Sundance, it doesn't really change anything for you. And I see that time and time again is true. They accept 100 films every year, but it's only about 3 films that end up making waves. So for me in our festival run is, I want the laurels, and I want the clout, and I want to go to these film festivals, but unless we're kind of one of those top 3 that is then shopped by someone like Neon or A24 and says, oh, this is a filmmaker on the rise and we really like this movie and we want to do a distribution run for this, that's our A plan, to where if we can get in and get noticed and have a studio buy the movie and do distribution for us, then great. But if not, then we're going to find a way to put ourselves in theaters no matter what. And we have a good game plan in order to do so.
How do you feel, just your opinion, about the movie industry in general right now, from the amount of streaming services? I will tell you, I don't go to theaters very much. I got 14 or 12-year-old. It's, it's all of a sudden it's like a $200 trip, like, you're like, man, I'll just wait for it to come on iTunes. Like how do you sit and feel about it right now? Like, is it in a good spot, bad spot, mediocre spot, just in general, just how we consume movies, not so much the investment, just how we're consuming sort of content in today's world. How do you feel about it?
I always remember the fact that everyone, like, there's so many people and so many people consume things in different ways. So in regards to the state of the industry, just in regard to how people watch stuff, for me, I think personally, the writing in most things has gotten pretty poor. I don't see a lot of things that are original that make me want to go and see something. I think a lot of these studios and filmmakers are doing a bad job of advertising to the right people. I mean, Darren Aronofsky has a movie in theaters right now, and I didn't know that until I was randomly scrolling for a movie I wanted to watch.
I didn't know
and
that.
He's one of my favorite filmmakers. So that's a failure on the marketing team, right? And then I use like a Nora as a good template example, because when you talk to like an average person, one, they probably haven't even heard of that movie. Or if they have heard of it, they definitely haven't seen it. And if they, but they don't know that it won the most Oscars this year, and that it was an incredibly profitable movie. So I do think that it's changing in a fact that very rarely do we get the property pieces that shape culture. The Squid Games, to where like for 2 weeks, that's the most talked about thing on the planet. That's kind of become the new format for it. It's very rare to see the Indiana Joneses of the world, unless it's like a Disney superhero. But even then, that's changing. So I do think it's coming down more to what people like and what types of people like to watch their stuff where. And as long as you're just kind of staying open-minded and optimistic about who those audiences are, I think they're always there. It's just not going to be the glory days of what you wanted to in the 70s when you got your first opportunity to make a movie, and no matter what, it was going to make money because of DVD sales in the 90s and early 2000s. Like, that's gone. So it's more so just how excited about your film are you, and are you doing the work that it takes in order to make sure that people who are also excited about it get to watch it on whatever platform they like to watch things.
But does that make it challenging on your end to think about all the different potential channels and ways to communicate? I mean, so I ran recording studios, and that's one of the things that bit me in the butt, is just imagining like people are listening on this. I've got a $50,000 recording console, microphone, all of this money spent on this, and they're listening to it on these things, or back in the day, the little earbuds that sound like, or they're just listening to it on their phone, or it's been compressed by YouTube in some weird way, and you're like, oh my God, what is that? Like, do you think about that stuff, or you're like, screw it, I'm just going to make a great piece and not worry about the tech so much?
Yeah, I mean, you do both, right? So as a purist, you wish people would be doing that, but the people who want to do that will do that. Otherwise, I describe like James Cameron when he was playing reels of Titanic. It would play so frequently that that some of the reels would just break. They would break and then be shredded and faded because of how many times they're playing. Like, there's no perfect scenario where you can preview something. It's
Yeah.
why story reigns supreme. Like,
Mm-hmm.
some of my favorite movies was watching on an old tube television that just came on TV, right?
Right.
And it's a bad aspect ratio, and part of it's cut off and cropped.
Yeah.
But if the movie's good enough and effective enough, it doesn't matter the technical side of things.
Right.
Like, you do it as perfect as you can to maximize its quality on every single platform. That's what a good mix is all about.
Yeah.
But in the end, you don't get to control those factors. You hope you just make something that resonates.
Yeah. Yeah. So where do you see this, the next maybe 3.5 to 4 years sort of looking like? Is this something that you see franchising into more properties around this? Do you see it's a one-off standoff thing? We're just focusing on now, and 3 years from now, you're still kind of working this property. Like, how do you sort of see the next maybe 3 to 4 years out looking?
Yeah, this is a debut feature, so it's my first film, but I don't have any plans nor desire to make sequels out of this. It's a standalone story.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very contained story that doesn't need anything more from it. For me, more so, it's proving that we can do what we say we're going to do, and then letting that momentum and the relationships that we've built let us go and make another movie.
Yeah.
So me and my producer have already talked about concepts and plot points of what we want for our next film, which is an action adventure film in Spain. And so it'd be very different from what we're doing with Starfish.
Mm-hmm.
But that would be the goal probably 3-4 years from now, is probably have another script ready and be able to enter into pre-production, all the while making sure we're maximizing viewership and community and audience base for Starfish.
Yeah. And in today's world, what are the timelines typically of movies, right? Is this a movie has sort of and I know they could have, you could have a come back 20 years from now or whatever, but like in general, do we look at movies as like, man, you're really pushing this 2 years, 3 years, like, that you're really, and then after that, just kind of letting it go to the iTunes of the world, or the distribution channels, or the Amazons of the world, or do you think of it that way? Or do you think of it like you're always working the title?
No, I do think I would describe it more as when you take your foot off the gas.
Okay.
So yeah, I think about 3 years to have your foot on the gas is a reasonable amount of time for me.
Mm-hmm.
But also at the same time, I don't know if you know the show Suits.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's got like Meghan Markle, and it was this kind of lawyer show, and it was released on, I don't remember which network, but then it kind of did fine, decent numbers. But then maybe 6 years later, it dropped on Netflix, and then it became one of the top watched shows on Netflix.
Yeah.
Right. So there's a lot of things like that to where I don't think you can decide always when something is going to take off.
Mm-hmm.
So you might find that you release something and it doesn't do very well, or you put your foot on the gas for 3 to 5 years and it does what you need it to do, and then you kind of work on the next thing. But then someone licenses it to HBO and it becomes their top movie or top show.
Right. Yeah.
So I don't really have a good answer for you on that.
Okay. Well, where can people dive in if they want to watch some of the stuff that we've talked about here? Where should we send people? Where should they go to dive into your world?
Yeah, the best place is going to be the WeFunder. So that's wefunder.com/starfishfilm. And that is where you can see the concept. You can meet us, the team, see the proof of concept, see some of the terms, meet some of our characters and kind of what we have planned. And then, of course, the website, which is watchstarfish.com. And on there, you can get a lot of the same information, as well as if you go to investors.watchstarfish.com, you can get all of the resources you need as far as our go-to-market strategy, as well as our ROI projections, as well as some of what our distribution looks like.
Awesome. Micah, well, I appreciate taking time out of your day in the middle of fundraising. I know you got a busy schedule ahead of you. Really interesting. I'm going to be following along from my end, but I always love good film projects, and I wish you nothing but the best.
Thank you so much, Jeff.
Thanks.